When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back, and this is the HTML All Things Podcast. This episode is titled... Actually, I'm going to give you the title before the title. The original title was ChatGPT is dangerous for junior developers, but we changed it to should junior developers use ChatGPT to help them code? Because, like anything in life, it's not all bad, it's not all good. Usually the answer lies somewhere in between, and I'm sure we'll get into that. Now, Mike, you are the one that did the research and wrote up this episode, so why don't you take it away once I talk about our affiliate link for Scrimba. So if you want to learn about Scrimba, if you want to take some courses, is what I meant to say, on coding, you want to learn how to code, web development, and a bunch of other things, and you want to do so in a hands-on but yet still online environment, you can do so with their interactive media player code editor, where you can pause what the instructor is doing and play with the code that is being executed or written right on the screen with their, again, interactive media player code editor. Our affiliate link will be in the show description. And if your podcast app doesn't support hyperlinks, it will also be in the show notes at htmlallthethings.com. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. Now, Mike, this episode was actually inspired by something, so why don't you tell us what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me dive right into that. So I have a person that I talk to every once in a while. We had a couple conversations. David Coe. He is a student at Algonquin College, which is just a college here in Canada. And he has already like pretty significant amount of developer experience. Then he decided to take a college course to kind of solidify that. Now, I think he's going to be graduating soon, looking for a job. So he's a great guy, great developer. And he's kind of given me a little bit of a lowdown on how like the college system is treating code recently, which has been really interesting for me, obviously, because we try to help people transition into a job. So it's important for us to be connected to people that are going through kind of traditional means of education, as well as self-taught, all that. So thank you, David, for that. And he recently reached out to me and just wrote this. So he said, "Hey, Mike, how are you doing?" He's at the Algonquin College right now. "I noticed that my classmates are heavily rely on ChatGPT for doing Java and web programming assignments. They got full marks, but no idea how to do flex or grid, or how to do for loops in JavaScript," right? And this brought up a lot of like questions right away for me, because we've been talking about AI and, positives and negatives, I think, on this podcast pretty well. But we've never kind of given direct direction for people that are just starting out on what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing with AI. And I wanted to have an episode to discuss that, to really give our point of view on like the dangers of relying on AI. Also our view on when you should be using AI as a new developer or as someone that's learning. And then I also want to talk a little bit about the future of the industry, where we're going to discuss kind of like where AI is going to go and what you need to do to differentiate yourself enough to survive the job loss that could potentially happen with the progress that AI is currently going through right now. So with that, I also posted a post on X, or formerly known as Twitter, with the same kind of question that the title of this episode is, like, should junior developers use ChatGPT to help them write code? And I got such a crazy spectrum of answers. Now, obviously, the spectrum goes from no all the way to yes. You know what I mean? Like, that's there are a lot of no's and there are a lot of yeses in very definite, like 100% Boolean ways. Both those, in my opinion, are very strongly wrong. It's always going to lie between, like Matt mentioned, like there is a spectrum to this, right? When you're first starting out, there's certain things that you should do and certain things that you shouldn't do with AI because of different factors. And that's what I'm going to dive into right now. So the dangers of relying on AI, using AI to like David mentioned, do your homework is the same as you reaching out to someone and asking them to do your homework for you. It's, in my opinion, plagiarism. It's the same thing as plagiarism. It is useless from the sense of you learning anything, right? So if you're just going through and just pasting and then copy pasting the response from AI into your browser or into your IDE and running that and then submitting that as your homework, that whole process is useless. You shouldn't be in there's no reason for you to even be going to those courses if you're trying to learn coding. I should be very clear on that. In certain situations, I want to have a little bit of a caveat here. If you're in a university or a college program and there's like a million different courses that you're taking and you can somehow use AI to facilitate the courses that you aren't interested in, who am I to say ethically, yeah, there is a gray area. It is plagiarism, but if you can get away with it, you get away with it. You know what I mean? People cheat all the time. That's the reality of these programs. But you need to realize that you are cheating, and you are cheating not only the college, but yourself. And if you don't care about the information that you're getting, either reevaluate why you're there or reevaluate which information you actually want to get, right? If you're trying to become a developer and you're taking a coding class and you're cheating in the coding class, that's probably not the way to go. You know what I mean? You should be doing way more than that. If you're a programmer trying to get a programming degree and you have a history class as an elective because you have to take it and you cheat in that class, who am I? Whatever. It is what it is. That's to me something more relatable and doable.
I'd like to kind of question this. So I'm not going to come out and say I condone cheating necessarily. Yeah. However, we always say that AI is a tool that, or I shouldn't say we all say this. The people who do not believe that AI is going to take all our jobs typically believe that it is a tool that we should learn to make us more productive. With that being said, school has this weird red area, maybe? That'd be green. I don't know. It's on the one side of the spectrum where when I was going through high school, they were you have to have book sources. You can't use online sources. And then near the end of high school, they were sort of well, why wouldn't you just search it up online? So it takes a while, it seems the school system, at least here in Canada, is a while for it to catch up with societal norms. Because society had already been good with, hey, yeah, just look this stuff up online. At the beginning of my high school, it took 2-3 years for it to actually start becoming okay. And it was a per teacher thing as well. And then you also have this SAI thing, which I would assume humans are creatures of habit, are going to have the exact same sort of problems. Because here's the thing is there's the plagiarism argument of if you are one-to-one copying something from a textbook or from a blog and you're one-to-one copying it, you've copied it. So it's been plagiarized at that point. However, if AI is giving you a snippet versus something like Stack Overflow is giving you a snippet, it's is there a difference there? This is a really kind of gray area. And so I wanted to bring this up, but I don't even know if we really necessarily have an answer, because are the schools, so David Coe has mentioned, a lot of his, I almost said his staffers, a lot of his classmates rely on ChatGPT to be doing their Java and their web programming assignments. And, obviously they're not going to be learning that much from it, assuming they're just quite literally typing in hey, give me a content box because that's what the assignment wants. And then they're copying the content box and they have no idea how to actually make a content box. They don't know what a div is. They don't know what an element is. Right. But if they were using the AI, so this is that gray area, if they were using the AI to say, okay, I really don't know what a content box is, they tell ChatGPT to give them a content box, and now they have it, and then they go through the content box. So they maybe ask ChatGPT, what's this line mean? What's a div? What's this IMG thing, which is an image tag? What are these things? Where is this does this fall? Because then there's also the argument. This is almost becoming almost like a rant, a very slow rant now. But then there's the argument that, well, ChatGPT is learning from all these blogs and documentations and things like that. And so it is plagiarism. But I didn't hear this argument when people were taking code snippets from Stack Overflow. And that's almost like a meme in the production, in the physical, the real job market. It's almost a meme to say, well, I just copied from Stack Overflow and it worked. So I don't have to, I don't actually know how to actually code that up. I just took it from someone. So like AI is just sort of, I guess what I'm getting at is like AI is in this sort of gray area, just like copying someone's code snippet. And again, humans being creatures of habit, it's like, this is just a more efficient way to look things up than it was on Stack Overflow, arguably, if you know how to use it, and if the AI in fact has insights into what you're asking it. So whereas I do want to be clear that I do agree that if you just sort of like ask for the answer or it gives it to you and you put it in, you know, whether the school considers it cheating or whatever, you are cheating yourself out of that knowledge. I don't think you should be cheating in general. Like, I don't think you should be cheating the institution, because I get it. Like, some people are going to be like, I don't have time, so I'm going to cheat just to get the piece of paper. I understand logistically that, but at the same time, it's sort of like you are cheating yourself, unfortunately, out of that knowledge that you more than likely will need to use, depending on what class it is, in the real world. So I understand what I've just said is almost word soup, but that is the nature of a gray area. That is the nature of that is the nature of this in between, like what is good, what is bad. And I can only say, as a final end thing I'm going to say is, as I can only imagine the conversations among faculty at these institutions and among the administration above said faculty deciding what is acceptable, what is not, just like how teachers and administration were arguing effectively and behind the scenes as to whether a web source back when I was in high school was acceptable or not. Again, being creatures of habit is probably the same sort of argument.
Yes, exactly. And this is a really good point. Like everything that you brought up, we will cover a little bit more like in the when to use AI section, but like, correct. You hit the nail on the head where like there's this really, really defined gray area of like, hey, there are many cases where AI should be used in these situations because it's a more efficient way to search the web, right? Like, and searching the web is allowed for the most part, but the clear distinction for me is like, it makes it so easy for you to get the direct answer to a question. Like a question could be, hey, loop over this array and write out every third element in the array or something like that, right? Like that could be a very basic, first level, one of the first questions you get from like a coding class, right? That is like, you can find that online, right? Like you can find that through Stack Overflow, probably. But a lot of the time in Stack Overflow, it'll be slightly tweaked. So like, it'll be like, oh, here's how to get the second element in the array every time, right? And so you'll have to go in and you have to change something. And that aspect of like, okay, I'm taking this code and I'm changing it to work with with what I need is important. That's what kind of solidifies how you learn and how you use the code that you find and how you integrate it into a code base. That little tweak, it actually does quite a bit. Like I know for a lot of people listening, that sounds like a really remedial thing. Like it's super easy. But when you're first starting out, it's gobbledygook. It's a foreign language. Imagine like you don't understand what an array is. You don't understand what iterating is, nothing. So just going through and figuring out what all those terms are and then figuring out, okay, so iterating, you mean the third, like literally 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. Like you start picturing how the array loop works and how the looping is and et cetera, et cetera. You get to the point where you're starting to understand some of these concepts, what an array is, what looping is. With ChatGPT, what's more common now is like you literally will copy paste that question and be like, write this code in whatever, like Python, whatever the code is required. And it'll spit out exactly the code that you need to run to do that, to solve that problem. Then you can copy paste that code and you're done, right? Like that's the level of simplicity that ChatGPT offers you for questions like this. And that, in my opinion, is not learning. Like you're not learning anything there. You don't have to tweak anything. Like the only thing you might be learning is you could even just trust it and not even have to run it, right? Like even setting up an environment to run the code is a part of the process. But I bet you some people are so lazy or so like, I mean, I've met a million people in this situation when I was going through my college degree and university degree where like some people just don't care. And they're just like, I'm here, I'm paying for it for whatever reason. And I just want to get to the end. And that's it. They're rushing to the end. And they'll do these things. They'll just type in the question, get the answer. They won't even run the response. They'll assume it's correct and paste it in. And a lot, like for a simple question, it's going to be correct. And then they've learned literally nothing, literally zero. So that in that area, there's no gray area there. That's useless when you don't know what's going on. That's that's garbage. That's cheating. That's dumb. Like I could just keep going and going and going. It's just stupid when you're first learning.
Can I actually say something there is like, I know we're talking about schools, but at the same time, I've recently done this on a production project just to experiment with something though. So, I mean, I've posted this online as well, and I couldn't get it working because I don't code in PHP, and someone ended up helping me in the Discord, which thank you for that. However, I was having this problem where, just as a brief outline, I had two custom post types in WordPress. One was facilities and one was activities, and activities happen in facilities. Makes sense. And so I had a relationship field from ACF, or Advanced Custom Fields. And basically what it allows you to do is it allows you to say, I applied it to the facilities, and I basically allowed, whenever you went into the CMS, the WordPress or the WordPress CMS, you were able to go in and say, which activities relate to these facilities. Makes sense? And then I wanted to, on the page, pull in a list of posts or activities, in this case, that were also in relation. And there is no easy, quote unquote, way to do that with no code. Yes, I found a plugin that hasn't been updated in a while and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But the point of the matter is like, without adding another plugin, I wasn't able to do that. I'm using Elementor. I already mentioned ACF, and that's how I'm handling that. So what I did was I said, okay, maybe it's going to be a custom query. So I go and I ask Copilot, and Copilot goes, yep, here's a function. And here's where the copying comes in. I don't really know how to code in WordPress, to be blunt. Like, I do small to medium business stuff. I do a little bit of custom coding, more so it's custom styling, to be honest. So I don't really touch this stuff. And so I paste this function in. It doesn't work. So I go to ChatGPT. ChatGPT gives me something that doesn't work. So I expand my query, and it gives me the exact same thing that Copilot does. Now, Copilot gives me a source. I go in and I check the source, and the source is from Elementor proper, like right from their documentation, and it's making this function. So I say, okay, this doesn't work. Why isn't it working? And so it tells me, well, it should be working. Try these things. I try these things and it doesn't work. So I say, okay, is there an alternative? I try the alternative and the page crashes. Now, again, this is me experimenting. This isn't an absolutely must-have feature. The client didn't ask for this. This is just a bit of dynamic data that I thought would be cool. And I've already completed the project at this point, or completed a large portion of the project at this point. I just thought that this little section would be cool. Didn't end up having it just due to deadlines and that. No big deal. But it's something. It's an example of I was just copying and pasting a piece of code in there, not really knowing how it worked, not really knowing what it was doing. And I was asking ChatGPT, like, what does this mean? What does that mean? What is this? And I tried to look up some YouTube videos to expand my knowledge. But at the end of the day, I really did not know what I was doing. And I was just pasting that in there. And that's effectively what you're doing if you're just getting an assignment, typing it into ChatGPT, getting an answer, and then pasting it in. Or even, well, I don't know, worse, but even if you do test run it, like Mike said, many people don't, even if you do test run it, it doesn't work, and you get ChatGPT to fix it, you don't know that thought process. Like, that's a big developer thought process of like, oh, like, what isn't working? Is it crashing because of the very last line, which means that, let's say there's 10 lines total, 9 of them are good, but there's just the 10th line is wrong. Is that all that the problem is? You're not getting any of that, work to conclusion part. You're not getting, that do your work, the classic, show your work in math class. You're not doing any of that. You're not getting any of that exposure. And so, I did limit my playing effectively to just, hey, can I get this working? No, I couldn't. Okay, whatever. Moving on type thing. But I didn't learn anything until I got help, and I got help from someone again in the Discord, which explained what the heck was going on. But I didn't know what the heck was going on the entire time. And even if I got that snippet working and I left it in there, if it broke down the line, I'd be like, well, I don't know what it was. So I guess I'm just deleting that area. I guess I'm deleting that section of the page. So how, realistically useful is that? In production, it's useful in that if the customer had demanded it and there was a deadline looming, yeah, I could have quickly done that, put it in. Now the section's done. But in terms of learning, especially in a school environment, nothing. I didn't learn a single thing. All I learned was how to change my query better so that someone in the Discord could help me. That's quite literally what I got out of the exercise. So, if you want to learn what the heck you're doing or want to learn how these coding, snippets work, just copying and pasting is, at least in my opinion, not going to work too well for you.
And it's the same thing with Stack Overflow, right? Like people say like, oh, well, Stack Overflow, you're copy pasting. Yeah, if you're just literally like typing in a question, getting an answer of Stack Overflow, not looking at any of the descriptions and copy pasting that answer in as your answer inside of your, project or assignment and having that be graded, yeah, you're not learning anything. There's no difference. It's the same thing, right? Like if you're not tweaking anything, if you're not changing anything, if you're not clarifying things, if you're not figuring out what you're actually doing, yeah, it is completely useless. Right? Like you're getting better, slightly better at prompt engineering. That's good. I'm not saying that that's completely useless. It is good to get better at asking questions. That is a skill that you'll need 100%. And it is a skill you'll need with AI specifically and with Google search and with Discord. Like all those things that Matt mentioned are a combined skill that you will need. But from a coding perspective, you're not gaining anything. And you need to value that as someone that's going through the experience of learning how to code. You need to value the resolve that it takes to figure out concepts and problems and do the coding, some of it yourself at least, with obviously the tools like AI and everything helping you along the way. It should be a help. It shouldn't be a crutch, right? Like you shouldn't lean on it. It shouldn't be something that you rely on to do your assignments for you, right? And like Matt said, the other main things in the dangers of relying on AI is that it can be wrong. And that's a huge aspect of it. It's not 100% correct. It hallucinates. It pulls from the wrong sources. It pulls from old sources. There's a million reasons why an AI answer can be wrong. As the more complex you go, so the more intricate your question is, the higher chance it has of being wrong. The chances of it being wrong on a simple algorithmic problem that's been solved a million times are very low, because there's just so much it can look at and compare and see which one's correct and not. The chances of it being wrong on like an integration problem with a third-party application, with a code, with a framework that hasn't been used in a while, like that is very high, because a lot of times it's just making stuff up at that point because there's just nothing to source from. And yes, in the right hands, even that making stuff up can be a good starting point if you know it's wrong. But if you're using AI as the source of truth and as your main source of like education, pretty much, or even not education really, as your actual like self, like instead of you, that's where you're going to fall, and you're going to fall flat in your face, and you're not going to be able to debug it. You're not going to be able to get anything running. And then even if you get something janky running in production, who knows how long it's going to run for, because something will update and you won't know what's going to update because you just copy pasted everything. And it's the same way with anything that you've just copy pasted without learning, right? Without diving into it a little bit and figuring out what these individual things do, right? Like if you're copy pasting a solution from Stack Overflow and you don't understand any of it, which happens, it happens sometimes, right? The chances of you being able to troubleshoot it go way lower. And troubleshooting is the skill that differentiates developers. That is a huge limiting factor in your ability to go to the next level of like intermediate software, like intermediate and senior and stuff like that. If you can't troubleshoot, if you have troubles with troubleshooting, ironically, that will potentially limit your career. So you need to understand concepts to a degree. You need to be able to query them. You need to be able to learn, not just use. And that's where I kind of put the line in for people that are just starting out. Like, it's an important tool, but you need to be able to understand the concepts and write out, a for loop without it, right? Like you need to even if it's just pseudocode, right? Like you don't have to memorize syntax. I'm not saying that, but you need to understand what a for loop does. The basic constructs of programming should be like inherently in the back of your mind at all times. Conditionals, for loops, data structures, objects, stuff like that should be like, okay, I understand it. Now I'm just going to piece together when to use it. I don't care about the syntax. Like I can ask ChatGPT for, or a Google or whatever, like whatever. You don't have to memorize shit like that. But yeah, fundamentals for sure. Just like with anything, like if you're a doctor, like you need to know the fundamentals of the whole body, right? And then you can rely on other tools to kind of put stuff together. Then as tools progress, you can put stuff together better. But like if you don't know how like the, cardiovascular system works, how are you going to suggest anything to put together? Like how are you going to even use the tool properly? You're going to give someone a bad answer.
It's kind of like the people that just do a little bit of light reading on health stuff, right? And then they'll be like, well, you take this, and they're just guessing, right? They're just like, well, the heart pumps, and so have this pump medicine. It's like, what? Like, should I be doing that? Like, should it be pumping that much type thing? Like, obviously this is completely made up, But there's a lot of people out there that will just do a shot in the dark. And if you're just taking code snippets from something like a ChatGPT or something, I mean, you're doing exactly like I was doing. I was taking a shot in the dark thinking, oh, maybe it's query ID. I don't know. Go check it out. Well, that crashed everything. All right. And imagine if I was, not almost on the site and I was just on the first step and I'm struggling that much. Like, not only is ChatGPT, or in this particular case, Copilot, making me actually slower, it's like it's bogging me down. I'm messing around with stuff now. I can't get things going, whatever. My own knowledge was allowing me to be faster. Now, yes, there's totally areas in which ChatGPT or Copilot will make you completely, faster, more efficient. I use it absolutely, but like using it from scratch and just sort of like blindly following it is, again, probably not the best idea.
Yeah. And a couple more reasons to add on top of that why you shouldn't do it at this right now, currently where the market is. It's 2024. It's the end of March. Like, currently, the market is very competitive for developers. You're going to have to go through coding interviews. Now, I'm going to say 99% of those coding interviews are not going to allow you to use ChatGPT or any sort of AI tool. So if you rely on ChatGPT all throughout school to do all of your coding for you, or even to like do a lot of your debugging, whatever, right? You're going to have trouble transitioning. And that's what this podcast is about. A lot of it's about like helping you transition into the role. And I'm speaking very bluntly and reality checking a lot of people here, because if you're relying on it and you're a great coder using it, that's good. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like, you can probably build a product. If you're a great coder, you're relying on it, you understand a lot of the concepts, but you're still relying on it, that's great. But as soon as you transition to trying to get a job, if that's your goal, you're going to get stuck, because you're going to sit down in front of a blank IDE with no types, with no ESLint, with no, IntelliSense, and with no ChatGPT or Copilot, and you're going to be stuck. Because that's what you've been coding with. So you need to learn how to use the tools. Like, you need to learn how to use the tools, but you also need to learn how to code without it, specifically for getting the job. Like, that's just the blunt reality. Like, it's unfortunate. I'm not saying that it's the correct way forward. Like, coding interviews should probably give you some of the tools that you're familiar with. Like, in my opinion, like if I do a coding interview, which I do very rarely, I usually do a code review session rather than a coding interview. But if I do a coding interview, and I ask someone to write code, I'm going to ask them to do it in their IDE, what they're familiar with, right? Like, that's idealistic of me, because I want them to be as comfortable as possible in the interview process, and to write the best code that they can do that they've been writing. And I think that makes sense, right? Like, that personally, I think that makes sense, right? You need to give someone the ability to show them at their best, rather than giving them a blank sheet of paper or a notepad and asking them to write code in a notepad that they've never done, and seeing them struggle through that. That's not indicative of their coding abilities, personally. Again, the problem is that I'm speaking very idealistically, and probably 95 or 80% or 90, I don't know how many, most coding interviews are not like that. So you need to think about it from that perspective. That's really important, because if you want to get into a job, you need to play the game. And this is the game. Code without tools. Sucks. Reality. Okay? The other reality that I want to mention is that there's still a lot of companies, because of the privacy policies and the weird intricacies of AI that people don't understand yet, they don't allow you to use AI tools for the company. Copilot, Codium, ChatGPT, nothing. Nope. You cannot paste code in and get answers. You cannot give context, any context, internal context to a company. Plenty of companies are like that right now. And I think that's a little bit over secure, but having said that, we don't know everything about how these companies are using the data that we give them. So if you are a very sensitive company that has extremely sensitive code, I don't particularly blame them for being a little bit cautious and going slowly and figuring this stuff out, because we don't know, right? So again, you might be limiting yourself in the opportunities that you can use if you're relying on AI tools.
This reminds me of the argument against no-code tools commonly, where people will not have any coding skill and then will just rely on no-code tools. And then let's just give an example. So if they're using a basic page builder, and that basic page builder does not support making a custom map, like a store locator or something like that. So then there's store locators out there, plugins or services. You can go in, import the list of all your stores, right? CSV, however it is done. And then it makes a map for you. You pay that service X amount a month, usually based on usage. And then you can embed that map. Maybe it even officially plugs into the page builder you're using. That's all well and good. That's fine. I use things like that. All of us use things like that. Page builders here and there, whatever. Especially if you're in the agency business, it's expedient. It's a way to get things done quickly. You're not going to custom code everything. You're not going to constantly reinvent the wheel. But the argument against no-code tools frequently is that you don't have any way to start from nil. So if you had to go to Google Maps, you don't even know the beginnings or understand the verbiage or the language used in the API's documentation on what to do. You can't even begin to understand that. You're starting, not even, let's say, at square one, you're almost starting at square zero. And so the argument is, what happens when your store locator plugin, implodes? Now, I understand this is a complex argument that we're not going to cover in this episode because, we use stuff like that. And we absolutely use things where if they were shut down, we'd be in some serious trouble. I know that there's many WordPress agencies out there that will choose a particular ecosystem, like Elementor, for example. If Elementor were to implode or just disappear for some reason, that those agencies assuredly would be in trouble. At the very least, even if they know how to code custom themes, there would be a heck of a lot of work ahead of them. It would be a big mess. So we all rely on things and whatever, but this AI conversation really has those contrasts in it, where if ChatGPT can't come up with the answer, are you able in any way to figure this out? Mike and I, we did a final, what they call the TR project in college. It was a technical report project where we built a hardware device that ran our own software. You could build like a calculator, for example, right? Where we wrote the software on the chips and then we soldered the board, made the boards, whatever, had a little screen in there, had some buttons, and then we did a calculator and that's what we made. And then we had to write this huge report on it. Well, there was one part where in my particular case, I had to plug my device, which was a Lux meter, into a computer and have it extract the data, but not just extract it and throw it into a CSV, but actually have a bit of an app on the computer where you could physically see a little bit of a graph. I think there was some history maybe in there. I'm a little foggy on exactly what it did, but there was definitely a graph involved in those type of things. And I did not have ChatGPT. I did not have any AI tools. And this tool that I was looking for did not exist already. So I had to start at square one, but I didn't start at square zero is the point. I knew MATLAB, this is a piece of software, was capable of doing this. And so I was able to go into the individual pieces of MATLAB and say, okay, how do I do an input box? How do I do a graph? How do I get the input box to go into the graph? Okay. How do I get the input box to fill from a CSV? Okay. How do I get the CSV to come from, I was able to go through these steps and make it work. And some of the steps weren't MATLAB. Some of them were what they call UART. I'm not going to get into the whole procedure of using USB and serial and all this other jazz. But the point of the matter is, I didn't start at square zero like I was mentioning earlier. I started at square one. I knew MATLAB. I was able to look at the documentation because we had used MATLAB in class before. And I was able to say, okay, I need a 3D graph. I need an input box. I need a button. Or do I need a button? Can it auto submit? Can I press enter? I think I had some keyboard controls. Actually, no, I definitely did have keyboard controls to rotate my graph around and stuff like that. And I was able to do all that just by looking at the MATLAB documentation and a few Google articles and do that stuff there. But if I throw my entire MATLAB time, throw my entire, programming classes, of which there were minimal, if I had not paid attention and I had just, somehow found an answer book and then just literally copied my answer book all the time, I'd be like, I know it's MATLAB, but let me go to the documentation. Well, I don't know what any of these functions are. I don't know what that call means. Is this even I wouldn't maybe not even know that it was called an input box. It really square zero. So being starting at square one in my sort of scale of example right now is really crucial, and it really helps. And relying completely on a tool, AI or otherwise, that just straight up gives you the answer is probably not the answer. It's probably not the answer that you're looking for because you can't extrapolate.
Yeah. And again, to clarify, we're talking from a position of I'm going through school and I want to get a job in the industry.
Yes.
That's the position we're talking from right now. If you're trying to get your startup built out and you have an idea and you want to build something quickly, use all the freaking tools you want. I don't give a crap. Like, have
business
AI
changes things.
Yeah, I have AI literally write the whole thing for you, get it up there, get it running. It does not matter at that point. You're not trying to get a job. So you're not going through the traditional means. Don't do it traditionally, period. Right? Like, don't learn coding from scratch at that point. You're just get something going and then hire someone to do the coding for you when it becomes something big.
There's a reason why Shopify exists, is because like people that are trying to sell keychains or enter in other item here do not want to learn how to code, make an operating system to, like, it's ridiculous. Like, obviously you're relying on tools like Windows and Mac and Shopify and stuff. Like, obviously you're using these tools, but the keychain maker probably has a backup supplier that they could use if this one goes under. The coding person, I don't know, the developer, is going to use no-code tools when the business part comes in. This has got to be done quick. This is for cash. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to do this quick. But if everything were to collapse, I could make you something, at least.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we've covered a lot of the dangers. Let's talk some about the when to use AI. We've already mentioned a little things here and there, but explaining hard to explain concepts in different ways. This one's huge for me particularly. When a professor or a teacher is talking, they only explain it usually one, maybe two ways if they're a really good teacher, because they know the fact that not everyone learns everything the same way. Right. So one explanation does not suit everyone in the classroom, right? Like, how you explain a for loop one way might not resonate with the people that don't understand it analytically or, whatever. So if you know the type of learner you are, and I always emphasize that it's important to figure out which teachers were best for you and figure out why. If you know the type of learner you are, you can take the concepts that didn't make sense during your class, type that into ChatGPT, and tell them what type of learner you are. So if you're like a visual learner, visual might be a little bit difficult, but it can do visual now. So it might be able to get you there. But if you're like an analytical learner, or if you just need it in a different language and simpler, right? Like, cut it down to, make it, explain it like I'm 5. You can ask ChatGPT those things and it'll cut it down and make it simpler and simpler. And then you can kind of go up again, like, okay, explain it a little bit more in depth, and have your own learning experience catered to you when you're learning these fundamental concepts, right? Like, anything you're learning in the first few years of computer science or computer whatever is pretty safe to assume that ChatGPT knows how to teach you that, right? Like, we talked about ChatGPT being wrong a lot of times, and that is possible, but usually that's like in a complex implementation perspective. What ChatGPT is good at is being good at explaining textbook stuff in different ways, right? Like, that's the really good use case of an AI LLM model. So use it for that.
Humans are also wrong too. Like, a human teacher can also be wrong.
Yeah, 100%. That's another very good point. Like, I have another point here where it's like, use it as your mentor, right? Like, it's really hard to get a human mentor as a new developer. Like, it's a huge time investment. Like, I've done it before. It's a massive time investment, and you have this like obligation to make sure like both the mentor and the mentee have an obligation to make sure that they don't waste each other's time and stuff like that. It's a very big undertaking. If you can get one, that's amazing, right? Like, that's what networking is about. That's what talking to your professors is about. All that, like, it's important to try, but the reality is not everyone can do that because there's just not enough. So using ChatGPT as your pseudo mentor is great. Do that when you're first starting out. Again, it is a good thing. You can bounce ideas off of. You can talk to it like a person, and it'll give you responses that are pretty reasonable most of the time. And just having that ability to have that back and forth is a huge process. Like, we talk about rubber duck debugging a lot, which is essentially you talking to a toy rubber duck, like saying your problems out loud gives you a different perspective on how to solve them. This is the same thing where you're saying your problems, but now you're getting actual potentially useful responses back. So you have that double like back and forth. That is a big bonus over rubber duck debugging, and it's free. Well, if it's free for the most part. You can pay for ChatGPT to get the better version, but it's free if you're just using Copilot and Windows or something like that.
You could buy Copilot Pro as well if you want the enhanced version.
Yeah, you could if you're paying for it, great. But there are free versions of these kinds of programs. So, and like Matt mentioned, like, yeah, people would be like, oh, well, ChatGPT can be wrong. Humans can be wrong. Mentors constantly wrong. They will give you the wrong advice, the wrong path forward, they will be wrong a lot of times.
How many times have I followed a blog guide that's wrong? Like it just straight up ends up in an error, and I'm like, hang on, this is a beginner build. Like I am copying and pasting because I'm trying to see what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. It's like, well, this blog is wrong.
Correct. Yep. Blogs are wrong, and ChatGPT is also wrong a lot of times. That's not the point. The point is to get you a direction, to get you help unblock you, to point you to have an ability to talk to something or someone that has the insight to give you some advice. Because again, ChatGPT knows more than you a lot of times about the subjects that you're learning. So just being able to query it in different ways gets you interesting results, and I'm guaranteeing you it'll help you move forward. So it's a really good point. The other thing is like a lot of times you just don't have enough examples to explain something correctly. Like again, back to the for loop array problem, like maybe the example is just too simple and you need something explained a little bit better. And so you can query it for more examples, like feed it an example that you've already been given and be like, can you generate some more examples of this in different ways and different formats? It'll do that easily for you. It'll review your code. This one's big. So again, like a mentor, you can feed it the code that you write and be like, hey, is this good? And what do you think I should improve on? Right. And a lot of times, just like with anything with a mentor, some of it's superfluous. Like, hey, if you change this for loop to a for each loop, it might be a little bit easier to read, but it'll be slower. If you do this like variable declaration a little bit differently. But again, like you're just getting some insight, and usually it'll tell you if something's blatantly wrong. Like, hey, this is an industry standard. Like this is a terrible implementation. This is an easier one, right? That's what you're looking for. You're not looking for the nitpicks usually, and you can query it for that. Be like, hey, don't nitpick this. Just give me the big stuff. Like, is there anything that's seriously wrong with this code? Right. And then you'll get some answers back. That's a good way to get free code reviews, essentially, which are really, again, hard to get. It's a time consuming thing. It can help solve complex problems and then help explain the solution used. So a lot of times if you're stuck on something that you can't figure out, stuck on a complex homework assignment, yes, you can put the answer, like the question, into ChatGPT. If your intention is to figure out how this works, I have no problem with that. You put the question in, you get the answer, but then you can query it to be like, okay, why is this the answer? What's this? What's like, you can get a lot out of the answer that's received back, and then you can tweak it yourself and change it a little bit. And that, again, I'm a huge proponent of this. If you change something in a copy pasted thing and it still works the way that it needs to work, that is you learning. That is you knowing what to change, where to change it, and understanding the concepts of this snippet that you copied. So that is a big part. That is a big part of learning. It's okay to copy paste as long as you're understanding what you're copy pasting and you're able to modify it. Right. And then any repetitive tasks, a lot of times you might need like some data generated to be able to iterate over, or maybe some like charts to fill out in CSVs or something like that. Anything that you can repeatedly explain it something to do, whether it be like dummy data or real data. Like sometimes you just need to iterate over a column and just add all the dates. You can get ChatGPT to do that, right? Like it's good at doing those like repetitive remedial tasks right now. It'll get better at other tasks in the future as well.
I'll give you an example of that, actually, like a real world example as well. Is let's say you're like, I don't know, a nurse or something like that, and you're in charge of doing the shifts. If the shifts are really complex, like, hey, this person can only work Tuesday at this time and blah, blah, blah. There are people that will type in all their staff's different things. Like this person can only work 4 hours. This person can only work 8 hours. We're on shift for 12 hours. We can't go on this. This is a holiday. All these things, print out a basic schedule. The nurse is not like getting the nurse is a nurse, like a medical nurse. This person is not meant to do like a complex math problem like this. So going through a ChatGPT or something like that is really basic. So it is really like makes sense. Like you can feed it all these things. It'll give you a schedule. And then obviously the nurse would review it, fix any problems, or ask ChatGPT to do that and do whatever. So what Mike is saying is, like, as a developer, to contrast it out of the real world back into school, is if your job is to make a pie chart from a data set, your job is not to go out and collect the data. That's something that ChatGPT should do, and that is something that you could copy paste, because your job is to iterate over it, do whatever you got to do to print out the data into a pie chart. That's just an example of that. The nurse is for medical stuff, not for scheduling, not for complex math problems like application. Jimmy can only ride the bus on Tuesdays. And like, that's not what the nurse is there for. And you're not there to collect all this data. You're there to display the data in a chart, in a pie graph, whatever.
there's a lot you can do with it. There's a lot you can do with ChatGPT right now that makes your job easier as a student, and you should take advantage of that. But again, it all comes down to the balance of like, hey, you still need to learn how to code. You can't rely on it for coding because you need to get the job. And to get the job, you need the interview. And to do the interview, you need to code. It's all a vicious cycle. Whether that changes or not is going to be the next segment right now. So future of the industry, right? The reality is these LLMs will get better. We don't know at what pace yet, right? Like we don't know the next evolution of OpenAI's GPT-5. We don't know what it's going to be capable of. We've seen what GPT-4 can do. It can do a lot of great things. It still has a lot of problems. But eventually we'll get better. And it probably will get a lot better. Meaning that a lot of the smaller, simpler tasks will be relied on way more with AI. So being able to, build out a website that can maybe even have a basic authentication and some basic data manipulation, right? Like that's something that is pretty heavily relied on now by web developers. That type of stuff, the very basic stuff that is generic and simple across apps, will be replaced by AI. Like you'll just tell AI what you need it to do in that scope, and it will do it for you. And that's probably, I'm talking within the next like 5 years, potentially, maybe, maximum 10. That's how I see it. So I'm not saying distant future. This is coming up. What does that mean for you as someone that's learning how to code? It means that you're going to be working on more complex problems. You're probably not going to work on like setting up a landing page with an authentication and some user data management. Like you're not going to work on that. You're going to work on how to integrate into AI. You're going to work out how to integrate into third-party systems. You're going to work out how to build out an algorithm that makes something a little bit faster or a little bit more efficient, right? Like it starts to get into the details here. You're going to work out a new app idea maybe that you would have to then interface with AI to figure out how to build some of this stuff. Like there's a million different things you can still work on as a developer, but this will require more deep knowledge. That's the big change that I see happening in the industry right now, myself included. I want to make that clear. The industry, especially in web development, we're all very wide with very shallow knowledge. We have to know so many different things. For a full stack web developer, it's impossible for us to go deep into anything, or difficult. I shouldn't say impossible. There's plenty of people that go deep. That is going to start changing. Because the simple stuff, the shallow stuff, is going to be the first thing that goes. That's the first stuff. That's the AI is taking that already. So unless you become an expert, like if you become an expert in TypeScript and creating a very type-safe ecosystem inside of a code base and making sure that it's type-safe across the front end and the back end of the database, that to me is deep knowledge that is very crucial to a company's code base, that they would hire you to be able to maintain their AI generated code base to make sure that it's doing things correctly, right? Like you need to be able to check the AI, and that's complicated. That's not easy, right? Check the AI solutions. That's the next level. So you need to go deeper. You need to understand concepts very intricately. You need to know how to use AI as well, very intricately, and know what its limitations are as it grows. So you need to continually be using the newest product. And you need to become an expert in some fields. That's the key. Like shallow developers will be the ones that are phased out. And again, I'm talking about myself here. I'm pretty shallow. Like I know a lot of things in a shallow way. I know some things a little bit deeper, but not enough in my opinion. So if I don't want to get phased out, I need to follow my own advice here. I need to go deeper into something.
I have a weird take. I can't remember whether I wrote a thread on this, like on the Thread social platform, or whether I was going to and didn't. I don't remember, but my take on this is really weird. So we've all probably heard at this point of Devin AI, right? Where people are saying, oh, Devin AI is really shallow and doesn't do much. And I haven't seen Devin in action. I want to be clear. I haven't seen Devin in action. I haven't, whatever. There was something that really stood out to me that relates to this in their marketing. And that is that Devin AI was not sold as a Copilot or a ChatGPT or an LLM, a chatbot. Devin AI is sold as a software engineer. And I'm looking at their website right now, devinai.ai, and the first heading, as of me reading this, is Devin AI website -- the first AI software engineer cognition. Now, I understand there's like a list of stuff, they have an introduction, they have all this stuff. This really stands out to me is that this is being advertised as a software engineer. The reason why this stands out to me is that all these tools that we've seen so far, Copilot is a great example where they've shown, get work schedules sorted faster, have it talk to your Excel and listen in on meetings you can't go to, and have it write meeting notes for you, and have it clean up text for you, and have it write articles for you, and have it manage whatever. The list keeps going on and on and on. But the thing is it's for a human. This marketing replaces a human. Whether it's true or false or capable or not capable, I haven't touched it. I've seen people complain that it's shallow and say, oh, it's not going to come take your jobs. There are so many entrepreneurs and people that Mike and I will call them serial entrepreneurs, and we've worked with tons of them, where they're very sporadic, they're very fast, and they're almost like jittery, almost like they're on coffee all the time. And it's because they're just ready to go at any one time. So yesterday, they may have wanted to dominate the craft show space, and they're going to make necklaces and sell it. And today they might call me and say, no, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to go into AI. We're going to do this and that. We're going to build bridges with AI. Like it's, a crazy idea, whatever. People like that are commonly CEOs of either, small to medium businesses, maybe even large businesses, but they run a lot of businesses. Many people like that move business forward rapidly. And I promise this will be related to this. Those people are calling me right now. They're coming to me, they're coming to Mike, and they're saying, I got an idea, I want to build this, right? Even if they're not that sort of jittery serial entrepreneur, they're just an entrepreneur in general. They go, oh, I want to build this. What do I need? I need a software engineer. Okay. I'll call Mike. I'll call Matt. I'll call Enter In Development House, web dev agency, desktop development making app agency. Enter in their name here. I'll call these people. This is not a person. So if these people that are entrepreneurial in spirit or have a cool idea, they go and they do their research and they find out, I want X built. I need a software engineer. This is an option for them now. This is an option for them to not call anybody, not deal with here we go. I got to deal with the people, go through their process. Cause Mike and I have a process that we use with people like everything else. And especially the people that want to move fast, whether they're serial entrepreneurs or not, they want to go now. They want to see it now. They want to try it out. Maybe they've already called 10 people. Like these people, sometimes they're really, really motivated and they go like crazy. So are we going to be replaced by Devin AI? I don't know if Devin AI is the one that's going to do it, but the marketing is certainly the thing that stood out to me. This is a one-to-one advertised effectively, right? At a shallow level, I'm effectively reading the heading, but still, this is a one-to-one human. And so, not a one-to-one human, but one-to-one human function. I need a software engineer. I got 3 Devins on my team. And Devin is obviously in its infancy, as AI is right now. And this is where I think we might get into trouble is what I call, I think I answered a thread or a Twitter or an X or whatever on X, where I was talking about how, and I'm just paraphrasing from memory, that projects may become about the motivators. So let's give an example. Let's say Mike comes to me and Mike goes, I have the greatest idea ever. I want to build a scientific web-based calculator. I want to build this. This is going to be the greatest thing ever, whatever. Today, right now, if he ignores AI, he has to go, if he's not an engineer, not a software engineer, he has to go and call up a development house, find a developer of some sort, right? Maybe a solo entrepreneur or a freelancer, whatever, right? He has to go and find somebody, go through their process, figure out their skill set, get their suggestions. Maybe he goes through a few for pricing, for different opinions. This person thinks it should be done in Python. This person thinks it should be done in CSS somehow, like whatever, right? He goes through this procedure and he chooses it. Look at there's a level of, time commitment there. He's talking to people, he's recruiting them, he's figuring out. He can go to Devin, he can go to Copilot, you can go to ChatGPT, type it in and be like, yo, I want to do this. What's the best way to do this? And you can get multiple opinions across 3 chatbots in about 30 seconds. And these people like Mike, if you're that entrepreneurial type and you go like, I want this idea done, I want this scientific calculator right now, which one are you going to go for? And if you're right, if your idea, you become a startup, you start raising capital, right? You start doing series, whatever funding and making all these things. You're considered what I would consider a motivator. And let's say it starts, the company scales for some reason to the point where it's too big for you. You might hire project managers and this and that and this and that. But the cogs of the machine, the people doing the work in a tech-based company that require development is often the developers. But they're not motivators, meaning they're not the ones that are coming up and saying, I have the idea to make the scientific calculator. Some of them are, right? Some of them will bring ideas to the table, absolutely, whatever. But the idea of a company structure, if you look at like the paperwork, if you like were to write out what the company does, it's like the developers make the apps, the project managers distribute the ideas of the administration, and the administration comes up with the ideas. Just kind of a rough layout of a company, right? The motivators are the project managers and the administration in my example. The motivators are not the developers. And so why don't you just get 8 Devins to make your different apps, and someone does the market research and someone does this and someone does that. And Mike, you're the motivator, and so is the project manager. And here's the crazy thing. The project manager is the project manager. Certainly they divide up the project into certain different, different quadrants and different parts and whatever. And then they don't go to a person or a team. They go to Devin AI. They're considered what in my, blanket sort of like rough idea, they're a motivator of the company, meaning they're motivating through, they're taking the motivation and creating the motivation of the company moving forward. And like, this is serious. Like, this is absolutely serious. I know people are like, oh, some people will think like I'm a doomsayer or whatever. I don't know what they call it now or anything like that. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know what the future brings. I don't know if AI is going to get real smart in 2 years and then just plateau and never get smarter for another 10 years. I don't know what's going to happen. Are there going to be laws that say you can't use AI? Or is AI going to be taxed? What's going to happen? I don't know. I don't even know what the hell the price of my cryptocurrency is going to be tomorrow. Like, I couldn't tell you that. But I can tell you that this marketing of saying this is a software engineer really stood out to me. And I guarantee for people that are not into the tech space, probably stood out to them too. I need a software engineer. Devin AI takes out an ad on Google. I'm a software engineer. Simply type in a prompt. How convenient is that? And if it works, whether now or in the future, how convenient is that? How much easier is that than hiring a team of people? And how much cheaper? At this point, a hell of a lot cheaper.
And it will go that direction, right? Like it's not a if, it's a when. Like what you're describing is not. It's an inevitability that could, we could run into a wall that takes us 50 years to get across.
Yep.
Totally possible. But it will get to that point because that's where we're going. That's the direction that these LLMs are taking us. That's obviously their goal. NVIDIA boss Jensen came out and said, developer, like, you shouldn't learn coding. I mean, that was a little bit premature, in my opinion. Again, like, I don't know if we've solved all the problems yet. Like Devin himself or itself, whatever you want to call it, is not the answer. Like it's super cool because it has like end-to-end solution capabilities, which is new for a product, single product. There used to be like auto GPTs, or still are auto GPTs that had something similar, but it required a lot of like janky connections between different AI tools. Devin is those connections more solidified. So like essentially like the example that they give, and I think the limitation that is Devin is like you send it to your GitHub issues and give it your code base, and it'll go through your GitHub issues and try to solve them, right? Like one by one. So it is essentially what you're mentioning, Matt, where like you just give Devin tasks and it goes through and does them and then like creates pull requests for you. Like it is a super cool system, but it is still very limited. But that's the first iteration. Though. Yeah, Gen 1, exactly. So like if LLMs continue to improve the way that they're improving in 5 years, Devin will be solving Kanban boards. Right? Like you're gonna have a project manager come up with the tasks required to solve a project, the user stories, and then Devins will go through the Kanban boards themselves and solve them, and then change the structure of the Kanban board to like I'm working on this one from in progress to to like from to do to in progress to in review to deployed. Now the reality is that like throughout those steps you're gonna need people for a while to double check the code, because we know that it's not perfect. It needs to conform, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I'm saying that you need to go deep, right? Like you need to be that person that can check Devin's code, right? That's the key here. There is still going to be that person. Instead of like a team of 20 developers, it's going to be 5 Devins and 2, senior developers or intermediate developers that are checking the Devins.
Assuredly. But this is also potentially and again, this has been said, is like this might be another revolution, like the Industrial Revolution.
Sure.
Like how many people went from, working on the farm, whether you're owning the farm or like working on the farm, to then eventually going in working at a factory or working in the city somewhere, because the farmer doesn't need 18 people to like harvest the grapes. They have a grape picking machine or whatever. And so they still need people, 2 people to monitor or whatever, run the machines or make sure the machines are doing good. Maybe a mechanic to maintain it and like fix it if it breaks. But I mean, that grape machine, the grape harvesting machine, is replacing 6 people maybe, because people only have 2 hands. I mean,
but the Industrial Revolution did lead to more jobs. So it cut jobs from this area and put them into this other area that then expanded, because now we have the capacity to support more people. So now we expand that scope and we have more jobs in different sectors. And that's kind of where I see this going, where like there will be more jobs created because of the tech sector exploding even more and democratizing complex problems and solutions. What happens right now, and this is a complete rant and completely made up in my head. What's happening right now is like these pillars are controlling major tech, the major tech industry, right? Like Google, Facebook, like Microsoft, Apple. These are the pillars that are controlling almost all the tech you're using. Okay. Almost everything you use are controlled by these massive corporations, because it's very difficult to solve the problems they solve. Right? Like it's very difficult and timely and costly, and like they need the best developers, et cetera, et cetera. That's one of the reasons, I should say. What AI engineers that can solve complex problems gives is Joe down the street has a way to compete with Google. He pays Devin $50 a month, gives him the idea, and now he builds up a smaller version of whatever Google is doing and is able to then grow that slowly. And now we have, instead of monoliths, we have many, many, many different services offered across the spectrum, made by smaller companies that then need more employees as well, because they need to maintain these systems.
Right. Yep.
And the ideas that they're generating also need more employees. So like there's going to be more companies generated, more ideas generated because of the democratization of engineering.
Effectively, our like meaning human race, I suppose. Our needs and wants will change, and businesses will adapt, obviously, to servicing those needs and wants, and therefore it could result in more jobs just in different areas. Yes,
that's the optimistic outlook that I like to have. Whether it happens or not is the same as what you're saying, Matt. It's all up in the air. We can't predict the future, but I like to go that route, and in that route, I think developers will still be needed in a certain degree. It's going to be different. Like I said, you might be checking code, you might be writing complex code, you might be solving complex problems with AI engineers. So whether you like that future or not, whatever, like it's just an example, a branch, you might say, of something that could happen in the future.
I think some people are scared too, because if they're in love with their job, I mean, their job may change, but that's always been the case. I mean, IT was different 30 years ago than it is now.
Correct. Which I think, like, living in the moment is important. If you love your job, that's great. Take that and live in the moment. Like, don't think about the future too much and just continue to build your skills and adapt. Like, I think a lot of people think too far ahead, and that makes them depressed.
And beyond their life cycle too. Like, I mean, like when you're a kid or whatever, like you kind of feel like you're going to like live forever. But then when you start like getting older, you're like, oh, I'm approaching 30, I'm approaching 40. Like, how many more years of working do I have? And then it's like, well, this is going to happen in 30 years. I'll be like, I'm going to be an old man.
Yeah.
In 30 years. So I'm probably not going to care. Yeah. Like, I'm probably going to be like, you damn kids with your Devin AI. Like, the heck with you. Like, that's probably going to be me.
Yeah, most likely. But yeah, that's it. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Matt, but I think we covered why and when you should use AI as a junior developer, as someone that's learning, as someone that's in school. And I think that's an important topic. No, I agree. I think it was a jam-packed episode about AI, and I've wanted to talk about my sort of view on Devin AI for a while as well. So I think that was a great opportunity to do so. Hopefully you, the listener, enjoyed that conversation. But it is time to end. And before we end, I'd like to remind you that we do have a Scrimba affiliate link if you want to learn how to code with their interactive media player code editor from a variety of different instructors across a variety
of different topics. Go and check that out. Link will be in the show description as well as on htmlallthethings.com in the show notes. And we'd like to thank our $3 tier patrons. I forgot to open the page. There it is. Tim from the Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com. Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com. Fire Ant Season via fireantseason.com. Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com. And Joshua via silvio.us. If you would like to become a Patreon yourself, you can do so at patreon.com/HTML all the things. And last but not least, we'd like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, a contributing author on HTMLallthethings.com. He's been doing some great work recently. We've had some big sort of interviews and then a companion article that goes along with it. So if Kevin Powell, which is a recent interview of ours, if he was talking about CSS and whatever, then Michael LaRocca has written up a companion piece so you can sort of read a bunch if you like to read, or if you just want to expand your knowledge on what we covered in that episode. That, of course, is on htmlallthethings.com. And Michael is the author of Self-Taught, the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. Go check it out. And feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform you're listening to this on. And this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.